that we're, thank you, whoever did that. I'm guessing it was Raphael or some other.
Nelly.
Nelly, thank you, Nelly. So at any rate, the board in the last 6 months has approved 2 new significant programs aimed at local government funding for sustainability, greenhouse gas reduction, and electrification. We'll be talking about both today. One is our local government building electrification program that was approved by the board last fall. That has 2 components, a grant component and a loan component that we'll be hearing about from Blake Hershaft, who is our programs manager for buildings. And then we'll kick off with the most recently approved program, which is our member agency energy grant program that was as a result of our surplus fund effort, where the board ultimately allocated 68 million in community reinvestment funds, including direct rebates back to our CareFera customers, this member agency grant, and a number of other programs to support our goals in the coming year. So you can see here, we have a few requests of you. If you could please drop in the chat where you're from so that we can track attendance and know who wasn't able to make it, and we can do some direct outreach. We will take time for questions at the end of each segment. So we'll kick off with member agency energy grants with Raphael, who, by the way, is our Senior Director of Community Energy Programs and heads up all of this. Hats off to Raphael and his team. The recording has started. Thank you, Nelly. And we also have brand new web pages to support these programs. You can see the link there. That will include program instructions, the application. We also have a brief term sheet, a contract that we'll need you to take a look at that would be required to get all of this underway and funding out to you. So with that, let's go to the next slide and I'll turn it over to Raphael. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sean. And it may be worth mentioning also that this is part of a larger package of measures that the board has approved, including discounts or rebates to low-income customers in the CARE program, $300 a piece, and that was back in December, and then holding rates flat to last year's rates, so no increase in our rates at this time, meaning that customers are receiving 10 to 15% lower rates than they would under our favorite IOU. So one of a number of things that we're doing, and we're going to focus here specifically on these 2 funding opportunities for local governments, the member agency grants, which was part of the allocation from surplus funds that the board approved, and an ongoing program for electrification of public buildings. I'm going to start off here with the member agency grants. So let me go ahead and step into that. This was approved back in December. It is part of this allocation, community reinvestment. This program is a one-time program. So that's very important to understand. And let me go through the specific details here. The total allocation for this funding opportunity is $11.5 million. And it is a fixed allocation for each jurisdiction. So it is not competitive. The allocation is available to each local government, again, based on either the load share or the customer count. And I'll explain that in detail here in a moment. But again, the key takeaway here is that the funding is already reserved for each agency. You don't have to rush to get your applications in. You can figure out exactly how you want to use it. And you can, in fact, submit more than one application as long as the total is up to the allocation associated with your jurisdiction. So this is a table with a lot of numbers. We'll make the slides available. But what this table shows is each of the jurisdictions on the left, and we totaled the load, and that's the second column, and took percentages here relative to the total across all the agencies. And then we also took the number of accounts and how that percentage, what the percentage is for by accounts. And then we took those two numbers and said, well, we're going to allocate the larger of the two for each agency. You know, as you would expect, larger jurisdictions do have a larger allocation. But again, the funding is not competitive, so each agency is guaranteed to receive these funds for projects which you can determine. And to get into that, so in terms of the specifics, the intention here is to have quite flexible funding available to each of the agencies. It must be used for projects that are consistent with Peninsula Clean Energy's mission. So reducing greenhouse gases, energy efficiency, electrification, all of those are appropriate uses, excuse me. And this would include things such as installing EV charging stations for fleet or public use. You might, some agencies have expressed interest in electrification of landscaping equipment, and so including for, you know, private landscapers. More efficient street lights has been a point of interest. Building retrofits. Some of there may be other ideas here not listed, so these are just some examples. The funding can be used to overlap with other PCE funding with certain limitations. We'll talk about that in the building electrification program. So there's, again, intentionally quite a bit of flexibility here on the use. Now, there are projects that probably would not be accepted. So, you know, we know, for example, that bike lanes are a good thing and important for decarbonization, but that's not likely to be deemed, you know, consistent with PCE's focus. Or just generating, you know, funding the creation of reports, for example, we probably would not look to support that kind of project, nor administration or internal staff, operations staff is another general category that we're not looking to fund. We're really looking to fund something tangible. Now, there may be a gray zone in there if there are questions about, hey, can you do X? And it's not something that's necessarily obvious. We're happy to have a conversation, and we may need to check with the board with regards to certain concepts. But again, the intention is something tangible in the community that directly relates to PCE's mission and, of course, sustainability plans that many of our agencies have. Let me pause here for questions before I get into the mechanics. Any questions here on guidelines?
Yes, I have one. I'm Moises from the city of Los Banos. I wanted to ask, is this grant going to be stackable with PG&E um, uh, incentive programs, or let's say for electric vehicle charging stations, they're able to give us everything to the meter, beyond the meter? Are we able to use some of these funds to augment our mission of vehicle emission reduction?
Absolutely. So it absolutely is stackable. And stackable with external sources, also stackable with PCE sources, again, with certain limitations that Blake will discuss. So based on what I'm hearing from you, Moises, everything sounded like it would be, you know, consistent, and you could apply both sources to those projects. I'm also seeing a question here for Sigal. Hi, Sigal. The funding is part of the Peninsula Clean Energy surplus funds allocation that the board approved back in December. It looks like there's a question from Helen.
Good morning. Thanks for this, as always. Thanks. I really appreciate everything that PCE does for our community. Just to clarify, because it's not competitive, say we need one EV charger this annual, fiscal year, is it then counted in another year, or is this every year? Like, how does that work? If
This is a one-time allocation. We go back to the allocation table. In the case of Half Moon Bay, it's $155,068. So that would mean those funds could be called on, more or less at any time. Although we do want, once an application comes in and we fund it, we would like to see the projects executed within 24 months. And we would encourage using it sooner rather than later, so not waiting 10 years. Hopefully it's soon. But you don't have to have all your projects lined up at the same time. If you have, one small project, you want to apply for that now, and then 6 months later, or 12 months later, apply for another piece of it at a later point, that's totally fine.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sigal, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, hi, thank you, Raphael. And you could interrupt me if you're gonna go through these details along in your presentation, but you had said 24 months to spend the money, or 24 months of submitting applications. Like, what is the time frame of this grant?
We haven't really set a strict timeline on when you need to apply for all of your money, but there is we are eager to see things move promptly. So again, there's some flexibility there. We haven't set a strict deadline for the applications, but once you get the money, we do want those executed promptly. So 24 months for that.
Great. And then is it going to be, or will we get the grant through reimbursement, or at the start of a project, or will you be talking about this? Great. I could hold my questions.
So perfect question. So as I mentioned, applications can be submitted at any time. We don't have a strict deadline for when the funds have to all be requested. Multiple applications are okay. We will be providing 50% upfront, and then 50% at the conclusion of the project. So just from the standpoint of fiduciary responsibility on the part of the agency, we do need to make sure that the funds are being used as intended, and see that projects are actually happening and so forth. But hopefully this helps a little bit with from a cash flow perspective. If there are any interesting projects where this is a significant challenge, I would imagine that we'd be willing to have a conversation. But these are the guidelines at this point. As I mentioned, spent within 24 months after disbursement, and we will be looking for reporting on project progress and completion. We in the contract, and the contract is on the website, there is the option for a PCE audit, which is unlikely as long as things are moving along. And if it's an interesting project, we could do joint media or around it and that sort of thing, and happy to do collaborate on that. The application process is intentionally quite simple. So you can see it here on the right. It's essentially a maximum of 5-page application with the fundamentals on what the project is. We would like to see some effort at quantification of what the benefits are. We don't need a dissertation for that, and if you have data needs around that, we may be able to help with certain data needs. So let me pause there for questions on the process. All right, hearing none, then that's it. Any last comments or questions on the member agency energy grants.
Yeah, I have one more question, if you don't mind, Raphael. Will PCE be providing any, other than the grants, any admin or I guess other support? For example, if we wanted to do one of PCE's programs, existing programs, but just, let's say for the city of Burlingame, use that same funding and just apply it just for the city of Burlingame. Would PC be able to offer like back end support to us?
Funny you should ask that question. So we today already have a joint agreement with the city of San Carlos to administer some EV charging funds for multifamily EV charging. And we layer that within our own program. And we're in discussions now with the city of Menlo Park to do something similar around building electrification. So yes, if an agency, a member agency has a desired program that is consistent with an existing Peninsula Clean Energy program, then we would be happy to have a conversation about using PCE's existing program administration as a vehicle for that. We do need to make sure that the guidelines are consistent and that we're not creating some special process that's too special.
Yeah, and I would like to chime in to say that these member agency grants, they can be stacked, for example, with the next program we're about to hear about. But really what they're designed to do is to provide funding for projects that the city administers, that the city wants to see happen. So it's not really meant to be money that goes back out for additional, for example, a residential rebate or something like that. It's really meant to be project funding. So as Raphael noted, we will do that, but I want to make sure that the priority stays on local government projects as opposed to additional incentives for residential or commercial customers, because those are our customers too, and we can handle that. So just a little point of clarification for where our prioritization would be. Thank you.
Great, and looks like we have a hand raised from Bo and Helen. I don't know if you have another question? I see
No,
your-
sorry about that.
No problem. Bo?
Yeah, hi. Bo Bainey. I'm sustainability planner for Samtrans, Caltrain, and the Transit Agency, Transit Authority in San Mateo County. We're a special district, so I didn't see us on that kind of disbursement list. I'm not sure if that's a final or if we're going to be included, but just wanted to get clarification on that.
Sure. So this particular grant opportunity is specific to Peninsula Clean Energy member agencies, which are the cities listed and the county. That said, the next program that we're going to talk about would be available to Samtrans. And in fact, we have 3 programs that potentially Samtrans could participate in, and Blake will speak to those.
All right, thank you.
Raphael, can I ask one more question?
Absolutely.
Can you just, if you know yet what the reporting expectations will be for the projects?
Well, to be honest, we haven't created a report format, but and there may be some variance depending on the kind of project, but it's going to be something simple. So, 2 or 3 pages on key details and what's been done and how many widgets and that sort of thing.
Thank you. Great.
All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Blake.
Thank you, Raphael. My name is Blake Hershaft. I'm the Building Electrification Programs Manager for Peninsula Clean Energy. I'm here to speak about GovBE, our local government building electrification funding program. Really excited about this. I've been working with cities in San Mateo County for quite a while who are looking to lead by example. Have seen some great electrification projects, including new construction in Atherton, Millbrae, and Burlingame at their recreation and town and community centers. I'm also starting to see the County of San Mateo do some great existing building electrification. At the same time, I know it's been a real challenge putting funding together for some of these projects, that I've been to many of these buildings with some of you. So really excited to make this funding available, and I'll talk through the program. Next slide. As an overview, this program includes both a grant portion and a loan portion. The grants, basically an incentive, are up to $600K per project, but it will be based on the gas savings at each site. We have budgeted $1 million per year available through a competitive process. $5 million additional were recently added due to the surplus funds, specifically for school electrification. There's also a loan. The loan is $50,000 to $600,000. It's a 1% interest rate and a 7-year term. We establish a revolving loan fund, so the loan money that gets paid back goes back into the fund to fund future electrification projects in other cities. There's an annual grant cycle to apply for both. This first round will open in March 2024 and be open for a 6-week application period. And just also wanted to note that this is our third program focused on government buildings. We started with GovPV, which puts solar on government buildings, and we've started with installations on that, and then GovEV, which helps with electric vehicle charging. So really excited to really round out our programs for governments here. Next slide. Benefits, energy cost savings for local governments. Most government buildings will see some cost savings from electrification. Pools could see significant cost savings up to $30,000 per year. Adding PV plus battery would save even more money if that was added to those buildings. This will also help fund building improvements. Hoping that this funding request is estimated to help 30 to 90 projects over the next 10 years. Help with deferred maintenance of systems, which can be a problem in some government facilities, and electrification at some of those difficult buildings. We're excited to see the emission savings from this, 500 to 3,000 metric tons per year. As an example, a municipal pool heater has similar emissions to 100 homes. So good to see some of these bigger uses get electrified. Next slide. Some example buildings and project types. I'm showing here East Palo Alto Government Center, which is going through an electrification project right now. The San Mateo Animal Shelter, some pools, libraries, schools, youth centers, these kind of government buildings that you're familiar with, maybe fire stations or police stations. Next slide. The types of equipment that will be, that this is meant to be eligible for: space heating equipment, water heating, cooking, clothes drying, pool heating, maybe some lab uses. I know that's not a huge use, but maybe the forensics lab, the County of San Mateo is an example, and then other gas or propane or fossil fuel uses. Next, one thing that's not eligible and this program's not focused on, I think this might appear if we click a button, is backup generators. Backup generators really don't have a lot of annual greenhouse gas emissions, which is our mission to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They do burn fossil fuels, but they're rarely used. So this program is really meant for these systems that are consistently in use to save greenhouse gas emissions. Next. Project eligibility, a facility, it must be at a public facility with equipment served by a PCE meter. Must be an existing local government building, school facility, or group of buildings and or facilities. This will be for project construction which has not yet commenced as of the date of the project application. The project needs to replace fossil fuel equipment on site. That'll typically be methane gas. But I know at the coast there are some government buildings using propane, so propane is also eligible. And the project should be past the concept phase and can feasibly begin construction within 18 months of funding. We're planning to do this every year, so we really want to focus on projects that are ready to roll. Next slide. Eligible costs. Building electrification equipment costs. Implementation costs such as materials, labor, lift rentals, etc. Costs associated with building code compliance in direct relation to electrification measures. So something else has to be brought to code due to an electrification project. Initial and ongoing measurement and verification only if paid up front under the loan disbursement. This is really for ESCO type projects or something that might be happening under a loan that'll need M&V, or might be going for other programs like PG&E, like a program PG&E manages called GK12. Training if paid up front, and quality assurance provider costs. Next slide. Program terms, this is me repeating what I said earlier. About $1 million per year in the current budget, up to $16 per therm per year in gas reduction. This is important. So basically, the bigger a building or the more gas a building or equipment uses, the more incentive there will be. This is very similar to the amount we currently spend on our residential rebate programs. So it's a similar dollars per GHG savings. So if you need more information there, you can reach out to me and I'll let you know what a certain facility uses in terms of annual gas use. There's a $600,000 cap per project and a max of $600,000 per agency per year. This can be stacked with the loan. I'll go over that in the next slide. The revolving loan fund. This is a 7-year loan term, 1% interest rate. There's a pretty good interest rate these days. There's a $14.5 million initial seed funding round. Again, this revolving loan, it gets paid back so that we have a continuous loan fund available for future projects, and then it's kind of reserved just for GovBE funding. The max loan is $600K per project or $600K per agency per year. So if you had some massive gas using building that was eligible for $600,000 in incentives and also needed $600,000 in loans, that could be $1.2 million as a cap on a project. Next. And there is a match requirement. So a local government match requirement, the minimum should be a 25% cost share of non-PCE funds tied to the project costs. Considering these projects are typically going to happen when equipment is already going to be replaced, and there should be capital funding allocated to, let's say, an air conditioner replacement, we think that the 25% cost share should be easy to attain. As a note on this non-PCE funds section, when you look back at what Raphael had presented, if you're using that bucket and stacking it with this, that 25% still needs to come from somewhere else. It doesn't necessarily, it could be from a different incentive program, but something that's not PCE. Next. And here's a hypothetical project that may use multiple funding sources. Let's say a community center has 8 packaged rooftop gas units, which is an air conditioner and heating unit type, and is replacing a heat pump water heater. That might cost around $200,000 for that project and would save 11 metric tons of CO2 per year. That type of project would be eligible for around $30,000 in incentives. The city may have already allocated $100,000 to replace the air conditioners since they're at the end of their useful life. The city could then take out a $68,000 loan and pay it back to PC over 7 years, and these 3 sources could make up the whole $200,000 project cost, as an example. The project selection process. So the application is available on the website shown below right now. It's not available to apply yet, but you can look at it. We're trying to make this, it's very similar to a grant application, but we're trying to make it a lot more streamlined and easy than, say, a California Energy Commission grant. So you can take a look at that. There's also a handbook available online. This will be an annual competitive process. Projects will be selected based on urgency. That'll be if gas equipment is aging out or way past its useful life. We want to make sure those projects get replaced before new gas equipment is purchased. Shovel readiness, that's the ability for the project to start within the next 18 months. Total therm savings, so projects that'll save a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. A showcase project or high community visibility, something the community really interacts with a lot to help lead by example. And then equity or low income benefit projects that really help underserved communities will also get priority. Retaining the gas system, last piece, thank you. Retaining the gas system is allowed. This will be in some unique situations where a backup gas system may want to be available for really cold nights or something. And as long as at least 80% of the therms are projected to be saved at that building. Next slide. And then just wanted to really quickly go over the San Mateo County Energy Watch program, which will be really helpful to local governments in coordinating some of these projects. Next. So this really helps with regional coordination between multiple programs. The PG&E program I mentioned before, which we expect a lot of programs to stack funding between the PG&E GK-12 program and our Peninsula Clean Energy program. BayREN also provides assistance, and San Mateo County Energy Watch is really a great place to go to coordinate on all these assistance efforts. Technical assistance, long-term electrification planning, all kinds of assistance. So please reach out to AHUD if you want help there. There's one thing I really want to mention that I'm really excited about that Energy Watch provides, which is an inventory tool for gas using equipment at local government facilities. I can't stress enough that it's hard to electrify. It's a lot easier to electrify your equipment if you know it's there. So inventorying what you have is really a good first step to help apply for these type of programs. So please reach out to AHUD for more information there. And my next slide is for questions.
And just to be clear, so the Energy Watch program, which is administered by the County Office of Sustainability, and they're on the line here and can answer questions, is a separate independent program. We at Peninsula Clean Energy can answer probably some technical questions. So if you choose to send an email to Blake and say, what about this thing? He may be able to answer that, but if it's an extended thing, we're not really geared towards in-depth technical assistance. And so Energy Watch is probably your best bet in terms of thinking about planning and bigger questions that are going to require, more support. And again, Susan and Alad are on the line here and can answer questions about what they offer. Blake, can you talk a little bit about timing?
Yes, so we're going to open the application for this in March. I wanted to be able to give you an exact day on this date, but I'm still working with legal on contracting. It'll be open for 6 weeks, and then and it's not like a first. It's not like somebody who applies first has more priority than a different city. We're going to review all the applications at the same time when they close with a selection committee we put together. And I'll make sure to reach out to everyone here as timing is more firmed up.
So to be clear, the member agency energy grants, which I talked about, that application process is open today. The building electrification program should open sometime in March.
I would like to address a question that was in the chat. Just look through. So if there's any more in the chat, we'll get to those, and we'll, Adam, I see you've got your hand raised. Somebody in the chat asked, where did the $11.5 million come from for the member agency grant program? And where that came from was essentially an accumulation of funds since our launch in 2016 that the board reviewed at our last budget cycle, which would have been in last summer, so in 2023, and identified the need for to put a committee together for surplus funds and community reinvestment, which that group met for 6 months through the end of 2023, and the money is coming out of our fiscal year end 2024 budget. So that's why it's sort of a one-time allocation across a number of programs, the member agency energy grants being one of many, with a total of $68 million reinvested back into the community. All right, Adam, how about you?
I just had a thought during Blake's presentation, particularly the note about not necessarily supporting backup generators for a project related to GovBE. And I was just thinking about how I imagine there may be some potential projects that incorporate building electrification, but also want to add maybe solar and storage, given the interest in having extra electrical capacity for what's being put in. And so I'm guessing, if that were the case, would you start with a GovPV application maybe for that, or maybe is that like a case study you might like be able to talk through a minute?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. So, in general, under PG&E solar sizing rules, and Blake, you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is primarily based on historical use, although now there's some allowance for increased use. But it's probably preferable to start with the electrification first and then add the solar. Now, it could be a combined project. I know that the Willdan folks are doing some combined projects, and that can be cost effective. You could, for example, consider using the member agency energy grants for a portion of that, right? We could include the solar system. So there are a couple different ways that you could approach a project like that, and we would be happy to consult with you on that. Currently on the solar side, with the GovPV, we are not at this point taking applications yet for the next round, but we hope to open that, in the coming months. But it'll most likely be towards the end of this year or next year before we start to move on that.
Thank you.
Moises?
Yeah, I have a question concerning the application. So I went through and clicked through the application for the GovBE program, and I noticed that there's a government document section. Are you guys looking for a resolution from City Council with the initial application, or are you guys looking for that later on down the road when we are awarded a certain amount based on our gas conversion?
We have not specified a requirement as part of the application process. However, when we look to make the awards, just thinking it through now, Blake, I don't know if you've given this any thought, but my reaction here is it would be fine for that to follow, but we would want that to be pretty prompt, because if it's not going to happen, we want to then award the next one on the list.
Okay. Reason I'm
Yeah.
asking is because, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'll just add, going through the resolution process just to apply, would be, we don't expect you to have to do that. You would just want to follow up quickly and make sure you're coordinating with your city manager. There's also an opportunity to upload other documents like plans and stuff like that. So that's a big part of what I would expect to see that's uploaded.
Yes, I was planning on putting together a plan, obviously for council, but for the time being, maybe getting a memo to the city manager, having them sign it, stating yes, we are planning on doing this, and I do have the support from the city to continue with this application. Once granted, then we would go through the whole budget process and go from there. But you guys answered my question. Thank you.
The other thing is too, as we noted, the building electrification program is a competitive funding process. To simplify things for projects that were not awarded, we will roll them over, if desired, just automatically roll that application over into the next cycle. So if if an agency continues to be interested in doing a project again and it's not awarded, we will look at that same project in the following cycle without necessarily requesting a new application unless there's material new information.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. If there are no other questions, I do want to just express my thanks to both Blake and Raphael for bringing us these programs today in pretty short order. And we're very excited to roll these out. We've had very good feedback and reception, and we look forward to receiving your applications and all the exciting things that you will do. So here's the follow-up information. I've included Mark Hirschman as well. As you guys all know, Mark is our Director of Government Affairs and is available to all of our local governments if you have follow-up questions about anything. So thank you again, and I hope everyone has a terrific weekend. Thank you.